people with trust issues. What happened? My twin sister slid a pregnancy test across my bedroom floor and said, "I need you to be pregnant instead of me." I almost threw up. I was the golden child and Annie was the disappointment they ignored. When she got a B+, Mom made her refold the same laundry basket 100 times, hitting her hands with a ruler. I had a 2.8 GPA and got nothing. So when Annie begged me to take the fall, I said yes. She promised she'd take care of it by spring break, then we'd fake a miscarriage. I should have known something would go wrong. We bought a fake belly at CVS at first and Annie helped me practice. It was almost fun until Mom started documenting everything. Photos every morning. Weight chart. The first real scare came at dinner. The padding shifted and Mom's hand shot across the table, pressing hard against my stomach. Why does it feel different than this morning? Her fingers kept probing until Annie knocked over her water. But Mom's eyes never left mine. School became hell in a different way. They pulled me from everything I'd ever worked for. AP classes, clubs, even gym. Teen mothers have different priorities. My boyfriend Jack was in my class and I'd lied to him so he wouldn't slip up. He started bringing me prenatal vitamins between periods, announcing to everyone how he was stepping up. His friends threw him a congrats on being a dad party. Meanwhile, Annie was at parties doing shots, living her best life, and I just let it happen. That night I was helping Mom fold baby clothes when my phone buzzed. It was Annie. "I'm keeping the baby." Everything stopped. 2 months just became 9, all because I tried to do the right thing. As soon as Annie got home, I courted her. She was glowing. "I can't do it," she said. I felt it move. I wanted to scream. Wanted to rip off my fake belly and throw it at her. Instead, I begged. She hit me with, "You've always been jealous of me. This is your chance to be important for one." The walls were closing in. Mom's behavior turned manic after that. She'd materialize in my room at 3 a.m., whispering about checking the baby. Her hands would shake as she lifted my shirt, pressing her ear against the padding like she could will it to life. Meanwhile, Jack's mother, a lawyer with too much time, insisted on discussing custody rights and paternity tests. I begged Annie for an exit plan. She just shrugged. "We'll figure it out." We didn't. Tuesday morning, Annie collapsed in chemistry. Dehydration from morning sickness she couldn't hide anymore. I sprinted to the hospital waiting room first and found Mom pacing. "I'm pregnant," I blurted out, desperate. "It's me, not her." The hospital mixed us up. Twins, you know. I was babbling, making no sense. Annie was literally in a hospital bed, pregnant, and I was trying to claim it was mine. All I wanted to do was protect her. Mom went still. "Show me your stomach." My hands shook as I lifted my shirt. The padding had shifted during my run. She reached out slowly, pulled out my fake pregnancy bump, and smiled. She wasn't asking questions, just smiled that same smile from dinner when the padding shifted. That's when I knew she'd known all along that she was waiting for this moment. But then came something that not even she was prepared for. The doctor came out. "Your daughter Annie is 14 weeks pregnant. Would you like to see the ultrasound?" My perfect daughter, her voice cracked. Then she turned to me. "Mom, please." Her hands found my throat and my knees buckled. All those years of taking the blame, all those punishments, none of it mattered now. She was going to kill me right here in the hospital. "You made me prepare for your baby." Her grip tightened. "Made me love your mistake." Security had to pull her off me. I felt her nails tear skin before they got her restrained. Dad finally moved, not to help me, but to follow Mom as she got escorted out. Through the chaos, I heard Annie's small voice behind the emergency room doors. "Mom, Dad, is everything okay?" She was playing her part perfectly from her hospital bed. She found my pregnancy test. She sobbed as our parents rushed to her side. Said if I didn't let her pretend it was hers, she'd tell everyone at school. She wanted people to finally pay attention to her. She grabbed Mom's hand, the same hand that had just been around my throat. I was so scared. She said she'd hurt me if I showed. Security grabbed my arm and pulled me away from the emergency room doors while another guard stayed with Mom. My legs felt like jelly as we walked down a long hallway to a small white room with plastic chairs. The guard told me to sit and wait for the nurse. I touched my neck and my fingers came away with blood. The scratches burned and I could feel them swelling already. A nurse came in with a camera and medical supplies. She took pictures from every angle while asking me to turn my head different ways. The flash made me blink and tears started falling even though I wasn't really crying. She cleaned each scratch with something that stung so bad I had to grip the chair. Her hands were gentle but I couldn't stop shaking. She put bandages on the worst ones and gave me an ice pack for the swelling. The guard came back and said Mom was processed, but they'd release her soon since it was a first offense. He said someone from social services would contact me about filing charges if I wanted. My phone buzzed and it was Dad. He didn't ask if I was okay or anything. Just said they were taking Annie home and I needed to figure out my own way back. I stared at the text for a long time before calling Jack. When he answered, I tried to explain, but the words got all mixed up. I just told him I was at the hospital and needed a ride. He said he'd be there in 10 minutes. I waited in the lobby trying to make myself small in the corner chair. People kept looking at my bandages and whispering. Jack rushed through the doors looking worried and confused. He saw the security guard standing nearby and his eyes went wide. Then he saw my neck. His face went pale and he reached toward me but stopped. I told him there was a family fight and left it at that. He kept asking questions on the drive but I just stared out the window. He assumed it was about the baby stress and I let him think that. At home I went straight to my room and locked the door. I could hear Mom downstairs on the phone with my aunt. She was crying and saying I tried to steal Annie's pregnancy. She said I was jealous and had been pretending to be pregnant to get attention. She made it sound like I was crazy and dangerous. She told my aunt that I'd attacked her at the hospital when she confronted me about my lies. Every relative relative was getting the same story. I could hear Dad agreeing with her in the background. Nobody would ever believe me now. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning at the school was worse than I imagined. Everyone already knew some version of what happened. They stared at my bandages and stepped back when I walked past like I might attack them too. People whispered behind their hands and pointed. Some girl I didn't even know asked if it was true that I faked being pregnant. The principal called me to his office during first period. He said they'd heard concerning reports about my behavior regarding the pregnancy situation. He said the school had to take these things seriously. He was requiring me to see the school counselor twice a week starting immediately. I just nodded because arguing would make me look worse. Fighting back would just prove Mom's story that I was unstable. At lunch, Jack found me hiding in the library. His face was different, harder somehow. He said his mom had heard from someone at the hospital about what really happened. He wanted to know if the baby was ever real. The question hung between us and I couldn't make words come out. The silence stretched too long and his face changed from confusion to disgust. He backed away from me like I was something dirty. That afternoon, I saw Mom's car in the pickup line. She was helping Annie into the passenger seat, making a big show of supporting her and adjusting her seatbelt. Other parents watched and nodded approvingly. Mom rubbed Annie's back and spoke loudly about the prenatal appointment. When I walked past them to the bus, Mom didn't look at me, but Annie gave me this small smirk that made my stomach turn. She knew exactly what she'd done, and she was enjoying it. My first counseling session was the next day. Connie Marsh had kind eyes and noticed my bruises immediately, even though they were turning yellow-green now. She asked gentle questions about home safety and whether I felt secure. Something in her voice made me want to tell her everything, but I just said it was a misunderstanding. She wrote notes and said we'd talk more next time. She gave me her card and said I could email her anytime if I needed to talk. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Jack. He said he couldn't trust anything I'd ever said, and his mom was advising him to distance himself completely. He said he felt stupid for believing me and supporting me. He said he'd already told everyone the truth about my lies. Before I could type a response, the messages stopped delivering. He'd blocked me on everything. Instagram, Snapchat, even email. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. I realized I'd lost the one person who might have believed me if I just told him the truth from the start. 3 days passed before Connie called me back to her office during lunch period. She closed the door behind me and sat down with her notebook, tapping her pen against the desk while studying my face. The bruises had faded to yellow, but she kept looking at them anyway. She asked if I felt safe at home, and the question hung there between us for what felt like forever. I started to say yes, but my head moved side to side instead. She explained she was something called a mandated reporter, which meant she had to tell someone if kids weren't safe. Annie's sudden collapse at school feels awfully convenient timing, doesn't it? Here she is laying the victim while the narrator's wearing a fake belly trying to protect her. Makes me wonder if Annie planned this whole hospital scene to finally flip the script on her sister. She asked again if someone at home had hurt me, and this time I nodded. Her pen moved across the paper while I sat there shaking. She told me she'd have to file a report with CPS that afternoon, but promised they were just trying to keep everyone safe, including Annie. The tears came then, and I couldn't stop them. She handed me tissues and sat next to me instead of across the desk. She said I was brave for telling the truth and that someone would finally know what was happening. Part of me felt relieved, but mostly I was scared of what Mom would do when she found out. Connie walked me to my next class and squeezed my shoulder before I went in. At home that night, Mom was making Annie's special pregnancy dinner with all these vitamins and organic stuff while I poured myself a bowl of cereal. She didn't look at me or say anything about where I'd been after school. Dad sat in his chair watching some game show, and I wondered if he was waiting for everything to blow up or just pretending nothing would happen. The phone rang during dinner and Mom answered with her fake happy voice. I heard her say yes several times, and then she was writing something down on the notepad by the phone. She said CPS would be visiting next week to check on the family. Her voice stayed sweet, but her knuckles went white gripping the counter. She started cleaning immediately, scrubbing things that were already clean and muttering about people who couldn't mind their own business. Dad just turned the TV volume up higher. The night before the visit, I locked my door and tried to sleep, but at 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The doorknob rattled and Mom's voice came through the crack asking if I was awake. She said we needed to talk about what to say tomorrow and get our story straight. I stayed completely still under my blanket trying to breathe quietly. She kept rattling the handle and whispering that she knew I was awake and this was important for the family. After what felt like hours, she finally left, but I didn't sleep again. I just lay there watching the door and waiting for morning. Fun Me Underwood showed up at exactly 10 o'clock the next day. Mom had put on her best church dress and smiled, so why'd it looked painful? She offered coffee and cookies and talked about how worried she'd been about me since the hospital incident. She explained how confused and troubled I'd been ever since finding out about Annie's pregnancy. Annie sat there nodding and adding details about how jealous I'd always been of her. She said I'd been acting strange for weeks and everyone was concerned. Dad nodded along from his chair, but didn't actually say anything. Funmi wrote everything down without changing her expression. Then she asked to speak with me alone in my room. Mom's smile got tight, but she agreed and said of course, whatever would help. In my room, Funmi looked around at everything, especially the lock on my door. She asked why I needed it and I told her about the visits at night. She wrote that down too and asked for more details. I told her about the 2 a.m. visit last night and how Mom wanted to get our story straight. She asked if this happened often and I nodded. 2 days went by before the the doorbell rang during dinner. Mom answered it and I heard official voices asking for her to sign something. She had to stand there in the doorway with neighbors walking by while signing for legal papers. When she came back inside, her face was red and she was holding an envelope from Jack's mom's law firm. She ripped it open and read about paternity tests and custody arrangement. The rage started in her shoulders and spread through her whole body. She turned to me and demanded I fix this situation immediately. I explained that Jack wouldn't even talk to me anymore, but she said that was my problem to solve. She called me useless and said I'd ruined everything with my lies. Annie looked up from her plate and suggested maybe they should just tell everyone the truth about whose baby it really was. Mom's hand slammed the table so hard all the dishes jumped. We all froze and nobody said anything else. Monday morning at the school, my guidance counselor called me in to discuss my schedule changes. She said I'd been permanently moved to regular classes since teen mothers couldn't handle advanced coursework. I tried to explain that everyone knew I wasn't actually pregnant now, but she shook her head. She said the disruption I caused couldn't be undone and these changes were final. My entire academic future had been destroyed for a pregnancy that was never even mine. 2 days later, I was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework when the doorbell rang and Mom was in the middle of screaming at me about the custody papers from Jack's mom. She was waving them around and yelling about how I'd ruined our family's reputation when Funmi's voice came through the door asking if everything was okay. Mom's whole body went stiff and she dropped the papers on the counter. She smoothed her hair and opened the door with that fake smile she used for church people. Funmi stood there with her clipboard and I could see her eyes taking in Mom's red face and the papers scattered everywhere. Mom invited her in for coffee and acted like we'd just been having a normal conversation about college applications. Funmi wrote something down and asked if she could speak with me privately again. Mom's jaw got tight, but she agreed and went upstairs while Funmi sat with me at the table. She asked about the papers and I told her they were custody documents from my ex-boyfriend's family. She wanted to know why Mom was upset about them and I explained the whole fake pregnancy thing. Funmi wrote everything down and said she'd be checking in more often. After she left, Mom didn't say anything to me for the rest of the day, but I could feel her anger filling up the whole house. That weekend I was working at the bookstore when my phone started blowing up with texts from kids at the school. Someone had sent me screenshots of Annie's Instagram showing her at a pool party with a red cup in her hand and her pregnant belly obvious in a bikini. There were more photos of her doing shots with her friends and dancing on a table. I saved all the screenshots knowing Mom would blame me somehow. Sure enough, when I got home, Mom was waiting with her phone in her hand showing me the same photos. She demanded to know why I hadn't stopped Annie from going to the party. I told her I wasn't even invited and didn't know about it until everyone else did. She said it was my job to watch my sister and I'd failed again. She made me call Annie, but it went straight to voicemail. Mom paced the kitchen muttering about how people would judge our family and it was all my fault for not being a better sister. Monday morning my phone rang during first period and the teacher let me answer. When she saw it was from the hospital. Martin Lamb introduced himself as a social worker and said he was calling about the assault from a few weeks ago. He explained that the hospital had documented everything including photos of my injuries and witness statements from the security guards. He asked if I wanted help filing for a protective order against Mom. I told him I needed to think about it and he gave me his direct number. He said the offer would stay open and to call if things got worse at home. That night at dinner, Dad actually spoke up for one. He suggested maybe I should go stay with his sister in another state until things calmed down. Mom's fork clattered on her plate and she stared at him like he'd lost his mind. She started yelling about how he wanted to break up the family and send me away like I was the problem. Dad immediately backed down and mumbled something about just trying to help. Mom turned to me and said if I left this house, I'd never be welcome back. Annie sat there eating her special pregnancy meal and didn't say anything. Tuesday morning, I walked into school and saw a crowd around my locker. When people saw me coming, they moved aside and I could see someone had spray-painted Baby Stealer across the metal in red paint. The janitor was already there with cleaning supplies, but everyone was taking pictures with their phones. The principal showed up and pulled me aside asking if I knew who did it. I said no and he shrugged saying without proof there was nothing they could do except clean it up. I had to stand there while they scrubbed it off and everyone watched and whispered. Some kids were laughing and making comments about how I deserved it. By lunch, the photos were all over social media and even kids from other schools were commenting on them. Wednesday between classes, I was walking down the main hallway when I saw Jack coming toward me with a blonde girl holding his hand. He saw me and instead of going around, he walked straight at me. Right when we passed each other, he pulled the girl close and kissed her hard while staring at me over her shoulder. His friends all started laughing and one of them said something about him dodging a bullet with a crazy twin. The girl giggled and asked what they meant and Jack said loud enough for everyone to hear that I was the psycho who faked a pregnancy to trap him. More people laughed and I just kept walking to my next class with my face burning. Thursday, during my counseling session, Connie noticed I looked upset and asked what happened. I told her about the locker and Jack and she pulled out a notebook. She showed me how to document everything safely by emailing myself from a special account with dates and times and details. She said to include photos when possible and to describe everything that happened including who was there as witnesses. Then she wrote her personal cell number on a card and said to call her anytime day or night if things got bad at home. She said she was worried about me and wanted to make sure I had support. Something's not adding up with how the school's handling this mess. They can permanently change her classes based on a fake pregnancy, but can't do anything about vandalism everyone saw. Friday night, I was in the shower when I heard my bedroom door open. I'd left my phone charging on my desk, and when I got up, Mom was sitting on my bed holding it. She didn't say anything about going through it, but at dinner, she started making comments about ungrateful children who keep secrets from their families. She said trust was important and people who documented things were planning betrayals. She kept looking at me while she talked, and I knew she'd found the emails I'd been sending myself. Annie asked what she meant, and Mom said some people like to create evidence against their own families. Dad just ate his dinner in silence like always. The next Monday, Funmi called and said she was scheduling a formal family meeting at the CPS office for Thursday. Mom had to agree to the time and hung up with her knuckles white. Thursday morning, Mom spent the whole drive to the CPS office coaching Annie on what to say. She kept telling her to emphasize how difficult I'd been lately and how the fake pregnancy had traumatized her. She told me to keep my mouth shut unless directly asked something and to remember that family business stayed in the family. The CPS office was in a gray building downtown and we had to sign in at security. Funmi met us in a conference room with another social worker and they had a file thick with papers. Funmi started by presenting her concerns about our family dynamics and showed photos of my neck injuries from the hospital. Mom immediately started crying and talking about how hard it had been supporting one pregnant daughter while the other acted out for attention. She said I'd been jealous of Annie and created chaos to get attention. She painted herself as an overwhelmed mother doing her best with a difficult situation. Dad sat there staring at his hands and only nodded when Mom said something about how we'd all been under stress. Annie played her part perfectly, adding details about how scared she'd been of me and how Mom was just protecting her. Funmi wrote everything down without changing her expression and said they'd be continuing to monitor our family. Funmi asked about the hospital incident and how I got the marks on my neck. Before I could open my mouth, Annie started crying harder and said I attacked Mom first when she tried to protect her. She said I was jealous and went crazy and Mom was just defending herself and trying to keep her safe. The words came out so smooth and practiced that even I almost believed them for a second. Funmi wrote everything down on her clipboard without any expression on her face while Mom rubbed Annie's back and Dad stared at the table. After what felt like hours of more questions and Mom's fake concern and Annie's perfect victim act, Funmi said the meeting was over and we could go. Everyone stood up, but then Funmi asked me to stay behind for a minute. Mom's eyes narrowed, but she couldn't say no without looking suspicious, though she took Annie and Dad out to the waiting room. Once the door closed, Funmi sat back down and looked at me for a long moment. She said she was recommending ongoing monitoring and family counseling starting next week. She said she saw more than she could act on right now, but needed more documentation to take stronger action. She handed me another card with a different number on it and told me to call if anything happened before the next visit. Then she exploded about the counseling requirement. She said we couldn't afford it with all of Annie's pregnancy expenses and doctor visits and baby stuff. She called Funmi back right there in the kitchen and said we couldn't do counseling because of money. I heard Funmi's voice through the phone saying it was covered by the state and there was no cost to us. Mom's face went red and she had no choice but to agree to the appointment they scheduled for us. She hung up and threw the phone on the counter and said this was all my fault for causing problems. 3 days later, we sat in a beige waiting room at the family counseling center while Mom filled out paperwork. The therapist called us in and introduced herself, but I didn't catch her name because I was too busy watching Mom's fake smile. She asked about our family roles and how we all fit together. She said Annie was sweet and easy, but I was difficult from birth and jealous of my sister. Annie nodded along and added little details about how scared she'd been of me lately. Dad said nothing the entire session except to nod when Mom looked at him. The therapist wrote notes and asked me a few questions, but I could tell this was pointless. Mom had already painted the picture she wanted and nothing I said would change it. That night after everyone went to bed, I heard my door handle turn. Annie slipped into my room for the first time since the hospital. She stood by the door and asked if I hated her. I just stared at her from my bed and didn't answer. She said she didn't mean for it to go this far, but she couldn't back out now because Mom would kill her if she found out the truth. She said she was sorry and she left before I could say anything and I heard her door close down the hall. Saturday morning, I woke up to voices downstairs and looked out my window to see Jack's mom's car in the driveway. I crept to the top of the stairs and watched her hand Mom an envelope while some guy in a suit stood next to her. She was serving Mom with papers demanding a paternity test once the baby was born. Mom had to sign for them right there with half the neighborhood watching from their yard. Jack's mom said something about protecting her son's interests and then they left. I heard Mom throwing things in the kitchen and screaming about embarrassment and lawyers and money. Monday at the school was different because I'd started eating lunch in the library instead of the cafeteria. The librarian noticed me there every day and started leaving books on the table where I sat. They were all about colleges in different states with good financial aid programs. She'd slide them across the desk with this knowing look like she understood exactly why I needed to get far away. During my counseling session with Connie that week, I finally broke down and told her everything. I told her about the fake pregnancy and how Annie was really pregnant and how I'd been trying to protect her. I told her about the padding and the lies and Mom knowing all along. Connie believed me and said she could tell something was off from the beginning, but she explained that without proof. It was my word against my whole family, and CPS had to focus on immediate safety, not past lies. She said she'd keep documenting everything, but there wasn't much else she could do right now. That night at dinner, Mom announced she'd hired a lawyer to fight the paternity test. She said it was an invasion of privacy and harassment, and she wouldn't let them bully our family. Then she looked right at me and said she was using my college fund to pay for it. I started to protest, but she cut me off and said I wouldn't need college anyway after destroying my academic record with my behavior. She said I'd made my bed and now I had to lie in it. 2 weeks later, Funmi showed up for another surprise visit, and I was in my room when I heard her talking to Mom in the hallway. Funmi asked where my door was, and Mom said she'd removed it for safety monitoring to make sure I wasn't doing anything dangerous. Funmi's voice got firm and she said the door needed to be reinstated immediately because teenagers need privacy. Mom tried to argue, but Funmi said it was non-negotiable and she'd be back to check. She took pictures of the empty doorframe and wrote more notes while Mom stood there with her arms crossed looking furious. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of drilling and found Dad putting my door back on its hinges while Mom watched from the hallway. She didn't say anything, but I saw the small black camera she was mounting on the wall across from my room, its red light already blinking. Dad finished with the door and left without looking at me, and Mom just stood there staring at the camera feed on her phone before walking away. At the school that week, everything was falling apart because I'd missed so many classes for CPS meetings and counseling appointments. My English teacher pulled me aside after class and showed me my grade, a big red F staring back at me. She said she felt bad about my situation, but I needed to catch up on my own time. Same thing happened in history, where I was failing even worse. I started spending every free period in the library with stacks of makeup work, trying to cram weeks of lessons into lunch break. The librarian would bring me sandwiches sometimes when she noticed I wasn't eating. Wednesday morning, Annie had another one of her perfectly timed emergencies right before her chemistry test. She clutched her stomach in the hallway and made these loud groaning sounds until a teacher called Mom. I watched from my classroom window as Mom's car pulled up and she rushed inside to get Annie, holding her arm and fussing over her like she was made of glass. Meanwhile, I had to walk home in the rain after school that evening. My phone rang and it was Martin from the hospital calling to check in. He explained that assault charges could still be filed from when Mom attacked me, that the hospital had everything documented with photos and witness statements. He went through the whole process, how long it would take, what court would be like, and said to think about it and call him back. I thanked him and hung up, my hands shaking. 2 nights later, Mom was at another prenatal appointment with Annie when Dad knocked on my door. Why does Mom think that little camera across from my room is going to work when Funmi just made her put the door back? She's basically showing CPS she's still watching me every second. That seems like a really bad move when you're already being monitored by social workers. He came in holding an envelope thick with cash that we needed to move past everything and stop talking to CPS. His voice cracked when he said he couldn't lose Mom, that she was all he had. I pushed the envelope back across the desk and told him no. His shoulders sagged and he said he was trying to hold everything together, trying to keep our family from breaking apart. I asked why holding it together meant I was the one who always got hurt. He just picked up the envelope and walked out without answering, and I heard him go straight to his bedroom and close the door. At my next counseling session, Connie had a surprise for me. She talked to her friend who owned a bookstore downtown and they needed part-time help. She said financial independence was important for someone in my situation, that having my own money meant having options. We filled out the application right there in her office, and she called her friend while I waited. 20 minutes later, I had a job starting that weekend. 15 hours a week at minimum wage, but it was something. The owner understood about difficult family situations, Connie said, and wouldn't ask too many questions. When I got home and told Mom about the job, she exploded. She slammed her hand on the kitchen counter and said it made our family look bad, like we couldn't provide for ourselves. Annie was sitting at the table eating ice cream and piped up that she couldn't work because she was pregnant, shooting me this look like I was rubbing it in her face. Mom nodded and said I was being selfish, thinking only about myself when Annie needed support. She tried to make me call and quit, but the bookstore owner had already put me on the schedule. My first week at the bookstore was mostly peaceful until Friday afternoon. I was shelving books in the young adult section when I heard familiar laughter. Jack walked in with his new girlfriend, this blonde girl from the grade below us, and they went straight to where I was working. He pulled her close and started kissing her right there, his hands all over her while making sure I could see. Other customers started staring and whispering, and I just kept shelving books with my face burning. My manager came over, took one look at the situation, and told them to leave immediately for inappropriate behavior. As she walked them out, she turned back and gave me this little wink, and I almost cried from the kindness. The next Monday, Funmi called another family meeting to give us an update. She sat across from us in our living room with her folder open and explained that CPS would be monitoring our family through Annie's birth and the postpartum period. She said it was to ensure everyone's safety and well-being, that they wanted to support us through this transition. Mom smiled and thanked her for all the help, saying how grateful she was for the support, but I could see her knuckles turning white as she gripped her coffee cup so hard I thought it might shatter. 3 days later, we were back at family counseling, and the therapist was trying to get Mom to open up about her anger. She kept asking Mom if she'd ever considered that her reactions might be too intense and maybe individual anger management could help her process things better. Mom's face went red bed, and she stood up so fast her chair fell over. She said the therapist was clearly biased because of all my lies and manipulation, and she wasn't going to sit there and be attacked by someone who should be helping fix me instead. Dad jumped up right after her and followed her out to the parking lot, while Annie sat there picking at her nails, and the therapist wrote notes in her folder. That night, after everyone was asleep, I pulled out the shoebox from under my bed and counted my bookstore money again. 412 in small bills that I'd been saving for months now. Almost enough for a deposit on a cheap room somewhere after graduation if I could find one that didn't need first and last month up front. I separated the bills into different hiding spots around my room. $20 in an old textbook, $50 in a tampon box. The rest split between my winter boots and behind my dresser because I knew Mom went through my stuff the next morning. Annie woke us all up at 5 a.m., screaming that something was wrong with the baby. Mom practically threw Dad out of the way to get to her, and we all rushed to the hospital with Annie crying in the back seat about how much it hurt. The nurses hooked her up to monitors and checked everything while Mom held her hand and told everyone who would listen about her poor baby girl going through this trauma. 2 hours later, the doctor came in and said it was just Braxton Hicks contractions, practice contractions that were totally normal at this stage. Mom's whole face changed and she turned to me and said, "This was my fault for causing so much stress in the family that Annie's body was reacting to all the tension I created." Monday morning, the principal called me into his office and I thought I was in trouble again, but he actually had decent news for once. He said that while I couldn't go back to AP classes because of all the disruption I'd caused, I could do credit recovery courses online to make sure I graduated on time. The program wasn't ideal and I'd have to do all the work on my own time, but at least it was something and I could still get my diploma. I signed up right there in his office before anyone could change their mind or Mom could find out and try to stop it. My next shift at the bookstore was quiet until this older woman came in looking for gardening books. She kept coming back to my register to ask questions and eventually started talking about her daughter who went through something similar with her family, always blaming her for everything. She pulled out a piece of paper from her purse and wrote down information about a support group that met at the community center on Tuesday night. She said it helped her daughter realize she wasn't crazy and that sometimes families pick one person to carry all their problems. I thanked her and tucked the paper into my work locker behind my name tag where nobody would find it. 2 days later, Mom was going through the mail when she found the confirmation letter from the school about my online classes. She started yelling before she even finished reading it, saying I was trying to get ahead and make myself look better when I should be focusing on supporting Annie through her pregnancy. She grabbed the phone and called the school demanding they remove me from the program, but the secretary told her that since I was 18, they couldn't make changes without my permission. Mom slammed the phone down so hard the battery cover popped off and she told me I was selfish for thinking about my future when Annie's future was destroyed. At my next counseling appointment, Connie noticed I seemed more tired than usual and asked what was going on. I told her about Mom's reaction to the online classes and she pulled out some forms from her desk drawer. She explained that we could file paperwork for a restraining order and even though it might not get approved, it would create an official record of the situation. She said the fading marks on my neck from the hospital attack were still visible enough to photograph her documentation. She took pictures from different angles with the office camera and printed them out right there to attach to the paperwork. We filled out everything together and she said she'd file it with the court that afternoon. 2 weeks before Annie's due date, I came home from work to find the entire downstairs transformed into what looked like a baby store showroom. Mom had bought everything top of the line, $1,000 stroller, a crib that cost more than my car, designer baby clothes with tags still on them. She was arranging stuffed animals on a shelf she'd had Dad install in the living room and talking about how this baby was going to fix everything that had gone wrong in our family. I recognized the credit card she was using to pay for it all, the one linked to my college savings account that she drained months ago. Plus, Dad had been working overtime every week to pay for all of it. A week later, I got a letter saying the restraining order was denied, but the judge had issued an official warning to Mom about maintaining appropriate boundaries with adult children. Mom found out the next day when someone from church mentioned they'd seen her name in the court records online. She spent all of Sunday's service telling everyone who would listen that I tried to have her arrested for being a concerned parent who just wanted to help her troubled daughter. People kept giving me these looks like I was some kind of monster for trying to put my own mother in jail. Thursday night, we were eating dinner when Annie suddenly grabbed the edge of the table and her water broke all over the kitchen floor. In all the chaos of Mom screaming for Dad to get the car and grabbing the hospital bag she'd packed weeks ago, Annie reached over and grabbed my hand tight. She whispered that she was sorry, actually sorry. And it was the first real moment between us in months where she wasn't playing a part or lying. Then Mom yanked her away from me and pushed me back saying I needed to stay home because I just upset Annie during labor and this was a family moment that didn't include me anymore. The door slammed behind them and I stood there in the empty kitchen listening to Dad's car start up in the driveway. I grabbed my work uniform from the laundry room and changed right there because what else was I supposed to do? My manager picked up on the third ring, and when I asked if I could come in early, she said yes without asking questions. The bookstore was dead that night, and I restocked the same shelves 3 times just to keep my hands busy while my phone sat silent on the counter. His sudden cash offer to make me stop talking to CPS feels like such a desperate move. $2,000 just appearing when they claim money's tight for everything else. Around midnight, my manager brought me tea and said I could stay as late as I needed. I worked through the night sorting inventory in the back room, and when morning came, I was still there pricing new arrivals. Dad texted at 7 a.m. with just 3 words that made my stomach drop. It's a girl. Mom started posting on Facebook before they even left the hospital, and my phone buzzed with notifications from relatives congratulating her on becoming a grandmother. The post had dozens of pictures of Mom holding the baby, but Annie was barely visible in any of them. I stayed at work for my regular shift and my manager started letting me pick up every extra hour that opened up. 2 weeks passed before I saw the baby, and that was only because I came home to find Mom had turned our living room into a photography studio. She was taking pictures of the baby in different outfits while Annie sat on the couch looking exhausted. Mom didn't acknowledge me when I walked through, but I heard her telling someone on speakerphone about her perfect granddaughter. School became weird in a different way after the paternity results came back. Jack's mom had pushed for the test as soon as the baby was born, and when it proved he wasn't the father, the news spread through our entire grade in less than an hour. People started looking at me differently, like maybe I hadn't been lying about something being off, but it was too late for anyone to actually care or apologize. Jack passed me in the hall without making eye contact, and his new girlfriend smirked like she'd won something. 3 weeks after the birth, Annie finally broke down and told Mom the truth about the baby's father during one of their fights about night feedings. Some college guy she'd met at a party who blocked her number. Mom went silent for a full minute, then started talking about how we'd never mention this to anyone, and the family story would be that the father wasn't in the picture by choice. She made Annie promise to never contact him or tell anyone his name. With Mom completely focused on the baby, I basically became a ghost in my own house, which turned out to be exactly what I needed. I picked up every shift the bookstore would give me and spent my breaks in the back office using the computer to apply to colleges across the country. My online classes were going well, and I was actually passing everything for the first time in months. Nobody noticed when I started getting acceptance letters because I had them sent to the bookstore instead of home. 3 months after the baby was born, I got the letter that changed everything. A state school 8 hours away offering a partial scholarship based on my essay about overcoming family trauma. My manager agreed to write a reference letter, and Connie met me at a coffee shop to help with financial aid paperwork. We filled out everything together, and she helped me figure out how to cover the rest with loans and work study. I started buying things from my dorm room one item at a time, hiding them in boxes in the bookstore's storage room. The night before I was supposed to leave, I was packing the last of my stuff when Annie knocked on my door holding the baby. She came in and sat on my bed, and for the first time since this whole thing started, she looked me in the eye like she actually saw me. She said she knew I'd saved her by taking the blame at first, and that she'd tell Mom the truth someday. We both knew she was lying, but I let her say it anyway. She held the baby out toward me, but I didn't take her, and after a minute, Annie left. I loaded my car in the dark that morning while everyone was still asleep. Everything I owned fit in the trunk and backseat of the used Honda I'd bought with my bookstore savings. I left a note for Dad on the kitchen counter saying I'd be safe and asking him to maybe finally protect Annie now that I couldn't. Mom was at baby swim class when I pulled out of the driveway, and I watched our house get smaller in the mirror until I turned the corner and it disappeared completely. Makes me wonder if that timing was just luck or if she knew exactly when to leave while Mom was busy with the baby. Either way, thanks for sticking with me through it. Like the video. It helps more than you think.